You're listening to the Doctors In podcast from martinclinic.com. Although we share a lot of practical and, in our opinion, awesome information, what you hear on this podcast is not intended to diagnose, cure, treat, or prevent any disease. It's strictly for informational purposes. So enjoy. Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is a Doctors In podcast, and this is episode 179. And today what we want to do is, well, we just had a live webinar. So we're recording this episode at the beginning of April. And the last week of March, we just did a live webinar specifically titled How to Overcome Your Thyroid Issues. And we had a blast. You know, we had hundreds of people on there with us. It was a lot of fun. And what's interesting is every time we do a webinar, we stick around for quite a while. I can't remember how long we were there for after, at least an hour for sure. Mm-hmm. And we just answer a bunch of questions. And it brings me back to the days of when we used to have the radio program with live callers, right? It was a lot of fun being put on the spot, having to answer questions and stretching your mind and thinking quickly. And the questions were awesome. So what we want to do today, we're going to talk about a couple of studies, and then we'll go through some of the questions that were asked after the webinar now that we've had time to think more about them as well, if there's anything we wanted to add to that. So that's what we're going to do today. But first, there's a couple of interesting studies that have been out for a while in a sense, but I've come across them just recently, and I find them interesting. One thing you talk a lot about, you've talked a lot about it in clinic, you talk a lot about it just when it comes to health in general, is vitamin B12. And this one study basically concluded that a vitamin B12 deficiency, it kind of destroy your brain. Yeah. It can rot your brain out in a sense. We've said this before, but one of the things that happens as we age is our brain shrinks, right? Our brain, it sounds funny to think about, but our brain volume, brain mass shrinks as we get older, and that's somewhat normal. Well, it is normal. It's not normal when it shrinks too quickly. Yeah, rapidly. And one of the characteristics of Alzheimer's or dementia is a smaller brain, right? And we've talked about this before on previous episodes, and we've written about this in the past, but there are certain things that we can do lifestyle-wise that can accelerate the brain shrinkage, right? I mean, it can make things happen. It used to be that the biggest causes of brain shrinkage was smoking, right? When smoking did a lot of things for the body, but it also, because of blood flow and all that stuff, which antioxidant or free radical damage, really got at the brain. Yeah, shrunk your brain. And now the things that shrink your brain faster are all somewhat related to high circulating insulin, right? So they can shrink your brain. But what's interesting is there's a few deficiencies, key deficiencies that are so common. So there are a few very common deficiencies. If we were to list it out, we could do a full episode on the most common, whereas if we were to take 80% of the population, they would be deficient in these things, right? Mm-hmm. One of them being B12. So common. Reasons for that are dietary. Well, the two biggest reasons of B12 is dietary and absorption, right? Bad digestion. And you can add a third in there, which would be medications. Would be the cause. Almost every medication, I think we've said this on a podcast, is almost every medication strips your body of B12. B12 is sort of like, a couple of things about B12. One, it is a very finicky vitamin in the sense that structurally it's a very large vitamin, and therefore it's very hard to absorb. Almost everything that you can think of in your body needs B12 to function properly. Like, it's not like you're going to drop dead from a lack of B12 on day one, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. People associate B12 with energy, and they should. They associate B12 with oxygen, and they should. But B12 does a lot more things. Like B12, your metabolism doesn't work properly. You don't even lose weight properly with B12. And the thing that I like to tell my patients at the office, I said, well, there's a weight loss clinic in the big cities, Dr. Bernstein, and his trick is to starve you to death. Yeah, I know. He gives you 600 calories, I think. I mean, you can hardly survive on it. But then he gives you B12.
Like, he gives you B12 to stimulate your metabolism.
Well, it's funny because speaking of that, what's that diet they inject? Is it HCG?
Yeah.
They inject it, and they're like, oh, this thing's a miracle. I'm like, yeah, because you're eating 600 calories a day.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we will give you 600 calories to eat, and we'll inject you with this thing, and it works wonders. Yeah. Well, yeah, no kidding. You're starving yourself. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you a fruit roll-up every day and give you 600 calories, and you're going to lose weight.
Yeah.
You're going to feel
terrible,
and it ain't going to be healthy, and you're not going to have energy, and you're not going to think, and your brain's going to fall apart. But if the end result is just weight loss, I mean, that's why a lot of these things, and it's funny, right? Because a lot of times these studies make news because they're so stupid. You know, the guy who lost weight eating Twinkies, one researcher, right? And then all these stupid things. Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, you could do a lot of things to lose weight, but A, you're not going to feel good. You're going to take years off your life.
Yeah.
Your metabolic profile may be okay while you're doing it, but after, I mean, it just creates all these issues.
Yeah.
But I laugh when I see, and again, I don't know enough about them to, somebody's going to be listening and say, wow, the HCG diet actually does. I haven't looked it up. I haven't researched it, so I'm just talking.
Well, I see, again, clinically, yeah.
I don't know. I haven't done the research on it specifically.
It doesn't fix the root issues of what we always talk about in terms of hormones, right?
No, of course, and that's right. And it's not like they're just injecting HCG. It's that and a very low-calorie diet. So it's like, because I remember somebody telling me about it before, and I'm like, oh, so it's a low-calorie diet. It's a very low-carb. It's a VLCD, very low-calorie diet. That's what they call it in research.
Yeah.
Mouse
don't live on that.
No.
A mouse don't live on that.
Well, and that's why it's funny. And the B12, so as you were mentioning, right, you said the trick is...
it gives them, what?
Well, they have
gives
probably
them
energy.
It gives them sort of a false sense of well-being. While you're losing weight, you feel not bad because they're shooting you with B12. But anyways, B12, like I said, it's almost everything in your body, almost like, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, vitamin D, but it's almost like every cell in your body needs oxygen. Every cell in your body needs B12. So, and today, because it's sort of been a long lost relative, I mean, I can tell you in the 1950s, I remember this like it was yesterday. B12 was probably a little bit in the 60s, but big time in the 50s. If you had low energy, your doctor gave you a B12 shot.
Yeah, I remember.
Like it was...
Mom, a nurse, giving B12, like people asking about B12 shots all the time, right?
B12 shots. And, because in those days there was no taking a B12.
Do they still give B12 shots?
They do, but like to get a doctor to give you a B12 shot, you'd have to bring them to a dentist and have their teeth drilled. Because they don't do it. Because unless they see a major deficiency of B12, right?
Well, and the nice thing is that with supplements today, you don't really need a B12 shot anymore.
No. And it's actually better. They've proven it. Because people have asked me, why don't you give me a B12 shot? I'm so deficient. I said, no, I want to give you B12 every day. This whole thing about getting one shot a month, I mean, that's what they used to do. Well, of course, the doctor didn't want to see you every week in his office.
No, they want to give it to you every month. And you know what's so funny is that, like, if you talk to somebody who gets a B12 shot, what happens is they get on this cycle typically. They get a B12 shot, they feel awesome, and then over the next few weeks, their energy decreases again. Then they get a shot, then they feel awesome. Whereas if you take a good sublingual B12, it's consistent. You're always better to have consistent blood levels than a yo-yo or an elevator.
Well, a lady came in today, and we just kind of chuckled about it because she said, I stopped taking my B12. Okay. And I said, well, it's the first time I had seen her. But she listened to our podcast and all that, so she was a big fan of B12. And she said it just because she went to her doctor, and the doctor said, well, your B12's high. And I said, well, let me look at your blood work. And the B12 was still well within normal limits, and even on the blood work. But I said, I like it higher than that.
We like optimum. Plus, we use that term optimum all the time. What's optimal for one person may not be optimal for somebody else.
Yeah, and she felt so good taking it. She said, I feel so much better. I said, well, why are you stopping? It's a water-soluble vitamin. Yeah. Like, it's not like you're going to croak from taking too much B12. It's so good for you.
So, and one more thing, I guess, before we even talk about the study, since we've kind of been talking a little bit about the injections and stuff like that when it comes to B12, is B12, like I said, there's 3 ways people become deficient, right? They're not getting enough based on diet. People are scared of red meat today.
Yeah.
Or they got digestive issues, or they have
any digestive issue.
They're just not getting
it. It can be in
because
the upper
it needs
GI.
Intrinsic factor, right? The B12 needs intrinsic factor in your stomach in order to properly do its magic and get it. And if you have any digestive system issues, you're not going to get that, right? But when it comes, and this is the thing, somebody said, you'll ask them, it's like, are you taking B12? And they'll be like, yeah, I'm taking a B complex. Okay, that's great. I mean, that's awesome. You're getting the other B vitamins, but you're not getting B12 because you really can't swallow B12 in a capsule or tablet again because intrinsic factor is in the stomach and you need it. So the capsule or the tablet especially just never.
It goes bypass.
You can't get it. It's got to be sublingual.
Yeah.
It's got to be injection sublingual.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the 2 types of B12?
Well, and that's what I was getting at. Okay. And one of the frustrating things, and it's the frustrating things with a lot of supplements. So when it comes to B12, there's 2 that are on the market types of B12. And remember, B12 is the name for, like, generically. So there's what they call methylcobalamin, and there's a cyanocobalamin, right? So those are the 2 forms of B12 that you are generally can find in a supplement. Now, they're both B12, so it doesn't matter if in the supplement you're taking it's cyanocobalamin or if it's methylcobalamin, it's still labeled as B12 because technically it's B12. But one is found in nature and the other one is found nowhere in nature.
Yeah, it's synthetic.
It's 100% a lab creation. It's B12 and you're thinking natural, but there's nothing natural about it. And it's the cyanocobalamin is a lab creation. It's not found anywhere in nature. Somebody in a lab made it. Whereas methylcobalamin is actually found in nature, and that's the natural form, which means if you're taking a supplement for B12 purposes and it's in a sublingual, you better be taking methylcobalamin. And so we tell people to take a look at the label because it has to, again, and so many of them are in the cyanocobalamin because it's cheaper. It's a cheaper product. It's cheaper to buy. It's cheaper to get. And B12, if you're going to take it properly. Sublingual is the best way to get it. And in daily and in the methylcobalamin form, right? So that's important to understand. All right, so getting back to the study, what they found is those that had B12 deficiency, it affected cognition, first of all, and they think it's because it actually reduced the total brain volume, and they did this via MRI. So the study used MRI measurements. So they actually measured the brain volume, and what they found was those with B12 deficiencies had smaller brains, and then again, that affected cognition because your cognition, the ability to think and process and all those things are tied in to the health of your brain, right? Inflammation of the brain will affect cognition. Brain shrinkage will affect cognition. Free radical damage will affect cognition. So there's a lot of things that will do that. But B12, a simple nutritional deficiency like B12 will kill your brain. It will kill it. Yeah. And there are, again, a majority of people are deficient. And again, they get their blood tested. They may not be technically deficient, but they're definitely not getting optimal levels for what their whole body needs for health.
And as you age, it becomes much more difficult. You know, I always say, and I'm sure I've said it on these podcasts, if I could get into old age homes, and let me in there, I might be dangerous if they let me in there. But no, seriously, I don't want to go in as a patient, okay? So, son, listen to me. Do not put me in an old age home.
That's all right.
Okay?
This will be edited out of there. We'll edit that part out.
But all I'm saying is, if I could get in there and say, okay, you're limited to bring me 2 things, 2 vitamins for all the senior citizens are in those homes. You know which 2 I'd bring in.
I could guess. Yeah,
okay.
I think I've heard you say it a couple times.
It'd be B12.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee if we took their serum levels and their testing of B12, they'd be all in the low end. Most of them are on an enormous amount of medications.
The other one would be about their immune system and vitamin D.
How did you know that?
Yeah, I've been around you a couple times.
But seriously, do you know how much better these people would get? How much better their brains? You know, you and I talk about it all the time. I don't want to outlive my brain. The biggest fear in society today, and it's coming to a theater near you, is when people are losing their memory. How many patients did I see even just today where they're people that are young and they're 65 or they're 55? And I had a patient this morning, 57, starting to show early signs of dementia, brain shrinkage.
That's terrifying.
It's
and drug trials are failing, right?
But they're looking for love in all the wrong places.
Drug trials are failing, and this Alzheimer's dementia will be the next, in my opinion, it's going to be the next illegal frontier, meaning because pharmaceutical companies are losing the war on Alzheimer's dementia, they're not going to want any success outside of that, and you're going to see them going to go after. You saw it in the U.S. a little bit, right? They're going after Alzheimer's dementia prevention type of topics. It's just, again, it's when a majority of the people over the age of 80 have Alzheimer's, it's over, right? I think it's over. It's a coin flip, basically.
Yeah, it's 50%.
So people say they want to live into their 80s, but only 50% that live into their 80s have normal cognition. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this. Yeah, and we talked about this in a free training they can get on our website, where what you do in your 40s, 50s, and 60s determines the health of your brain in your 70s and 80s. There's no question. Midlife inflammation is one of the worst things for your brain, right? Midlife high blood pressure, all those kind of things are terrible for the brain. All right, so anyways, this study that was one study we found, which was
very interesting.
Very interesting.
And can I just the one thing? Any medication, especially metformin, statin drugs, high blood pressure medication. We're not saying don't take them. I'm just saying if you have any medication, if you're taking medications on a daily basis, you ought to assume in your mind that you are deficient in B12, and if you're not supplementing with B12, you should be. And that's just a general rule. There's the odd exception, but not many. Because just find that almost every medication, because what's well documented is metformin. It's well documented. If you're taking metformin, you should be taking B12 because it's one of the side effects. It strips away your B12. But I found in my experience in the clinic, and this is just universal, that if you're on any kind of synthetic medication, you are going to be deficient. Now, of course, if you're on antacids, if you are on any kind of proton pump inhibitor, if you are on any kind of steroid like asthma medication or whatever, and look, if you need that to live, man, go for it. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that you have to look at what is that stripping away out of your body. And like you say, if you don't have the right levels of B12, your brain is shrinking.
Yeah, that's a fact. So imagine throwing in a B12 deficiency on top of high circulating insulin. It's like a combination.
And if you're not eating red meat, I just hate to break it to you. I hate to break it to you.
Well, like somebody says, if you're not eating red meat, you better be eating a lot of oysters. And I mean, listen, I know some people love oysters, but if you don't love oysters and you're not eating red meat, you're not getting B12.
No, you're just not. So don't fool yourself. That's all we're saying. We're not, look, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan or whatever, just don't fool yourself. Don't talk yourself into that, hey, I'm having spinach or whatever, and Popeye had spinach and he was the strongest guy in the universe. Nah, he wasn't Popeye.
Yeah, I was talking about that in a video I recorded yesterday, and we're going to have it on our website. Just we did a podcast on it a while ago. It's just the top 5 reasons for hair loss. And in the video, I talked about...
It was very good, by the way. You did that solo with the thing about hair loss without me.
So I figured I might
Was that because I don't have any hair left?
I did the podcast by myself as well. It's the same topic. So I figured I did it once by myself. I could do this one as well. So I just recorded a quick video. And, it's interesting because in the video, and that's the thing, right? Like spinach... I mean, spinach is good for you.
Yeah, it's not
but
wrong, right?
it's also been put on a pedestal by certain things, and one of them is iron, right? Popeye and forearms the size of whatever, and he gets his iron energy from spinach and all these kind of things. But the reality is, spinach is not a good source of iron because there are two types of iron.
Yes.
There's
Hemi.
Well, that's an engine.
Well, that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
I think of the Chrysler engine, Hemi
so
engine.
Hemi. So every NASCAR fan listening got really excited. So the husbands that are not listening to us right now, they were driving and they heard Hemi and they just all of a sudden turned the radio up and they're like, "What's this guy talking about?" And unfortunately, no, we're not talking about Hemi that way. I've always called his Heme, Heme. And
Heme
again,
iron.
The young people think we're talking about memes when we say Heme. But again, it's heme, right? So there's heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is found in animal products. It's absorbed better into the body. Non-heme is found in plant-based stuff, and it's poorly absorbed. So spinach. So it's interesting. People will list the amount of iron in spinach, and they'll say, I think it's 2.6 milligrams for every 100 grams. So 2.6. And they'll say, see, red meat is 2.5, so spinach is better. Yes, if you list it numerically. However, it doesn't matter unless you can absorb it. So the actual absorption, non-heme iron has the absorption rate in spinach at about 1.7%. So the 2.6, actually, the amount that you absorbed is 0.044 milligrams. Nothing. It's a terrible source of iron. Whereas the same 2.5 milligrams of red meat, 20% of that is absorbed. So you get 0.5 milligrams. So it's a lot. That's a huge difference in absorption. It's a massive difference.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying on the methyl and the how do you say cobalamin?
Yeah, cyanocobalamin.
Hey,
no,
I'm old.
Well, listen, and that's the thing. I always say for every decade after 40, you're allowed to mess up a percentage of words.
So there you go.
You're allowed to on purpose. I'm 45, so I'm allowed to mess up like 10% of my words.
Yeah.
50s,
so the B12, if you look at that as being in the same analogy, the cyano, right?
Yeah.
Which is poorly absorbed, even though it says, it might have 1,000 micrograms or whatever, but you're not absorbed because your body doesn't even know what it is.
It's not natural.
It's not natural, right?
And also, it's interesting because, everybody heard of cyanide. It's like a kissing cousin. We're not meant to take a cyanocobalamin. We're not meant for that at all. Methylcobalamin is by far the best. You just got to find it, right? Yeah. And so anyways, when it comes to iron, like you said, right, so if you're not eating red meat and you're not eating oysters, you're not getting enough B12. You're not getting enough in your day. So you have to supplement, and you have to look for the right supplements and make sure you're taking the right supplements. And again, consistency with B12 does really well for people. And again, if you're worried about your brain as you age, B12 is just one component of brain health. It's the brain, and this is the thing, right? The more we read about the brain, you and I, the more we talk about the brain, it's a jigsaw puzzle. It's a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and even one little piece missing, and the brain can be in serious trouble, right? That's how fragile the brain can be when you look at all the things that are attacking the brain. And then look at the research this past year on even things that they never thought can happen in the brain, such as candida.
Yeah, big.
Crossing the blood-brain barrier and ending up in your brain. And they think a percentage of Parkinson's people have fungus, right? So just our brains are under attack.
Yeah. And it goes across a blood-brain barrier that we know so much more about.
Starting more and more. Mm-hmm. And you look at everything. So you look at everything that attacks the health of our brain. It's no wonder why people are outliving. Modern medicine has kept people alive longer. The lack of epidemic diseases keep people alive longer. But it's not helping their brain last longer. And, you and I talked about this on before and even a previous podcast, strong muscles, strong brain. Yeah. And then even that one study going further saying that leg muscles are particularly tied into the health of your brain. So if you're at the gym doing leg muscles, also thinking about it, people say, I was at the gym today and I pulled a sled. And that's not fun. It's not fun pulling a sled. But I did it today because my legs were sore because yesterday I did legs. I squatted, I did deadlifts. And so people are saying, what are you doing today at the gym, right? Because I always say I do an executive workout. So it's like 80% talking and 20% exercise. And they're like, what are you doing today? I'm like, today's leg day. But then I'll tell them it's leg and brain day. Yeah. And they're like, oh, now they know me, so they know what that means. Yeah. But it's leg and brain day because legs, the strength of your legs.
Isn't that incredible,
are tied into your brain health for sure. Now, listen, there's a lot of things that can cause brain, right? But look at in an old age home where there's a lot of dementia and Alzheimer's, and look at the strength of their muscles. So sarcopenia, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, they all fit together. But that's only one. That's then you got metabolic issues like high circulating insulin, glucose uptake issues, free radical damage, neuroinflammation, brain shrinking, all these things that are causing, right? But again, just look at the appearance. Look at the appearance of Alzheimer's dementia. And it's always, unless it's like an issue from a football player who took headshots. That's different.
100 headshots.
That's an etiology. That's something that you can explain that. But the average Alzheimer's dementia, there's a frailty to it, right? They look frail. Their muscles are not, they're sarcopenic, they're right? I mean, it's all connected. Yeah. It's all connected. And so vitamin B12 is just a jigsaw. But not only is it great for your brain, as you mentioned, you'll have no energy. You're not going to feel good. Your metabolism will slow down. Yeah. So there's a lot of aspects to.
Well, there's a whole area, too, that I deal in a clinical setting of what I call borderline anemia, right? Like you always say, anemia is not a disease. Anemia is a symptom, right? But a lot of times anemia is poor absorption, right? They're not absorbing their B12, or they're not absorbing or eating. They don't get enough in their diet of the heme iron and B12. They're not absorbing that.
I'm going to start calling it hemi iron.
Hem. I like that better.
Well, you said hemi. That's even better.
You know what? I would say to our listeners,
actually, it makes more sense because people really get excited about a hemi engine, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So either you have a hemi iron or you have a non-hemi iron.
So I think I'm going to stick to it.
I like it. Honestly, I like it better because it makes more sense.
Here we go. See? Finally, I got my son convinced.
We'll have to, because it makes it sound like the hemi iron is more powerful.
That's why I always have something to remember things. So it's always easy for me to remember hemi because I don't know nothing about cars, but I do remember the advertisement about the Dodge.
I'm writing
it's got a hemi engine.
I'm writing medical textbooks and journals to change the pronunciation from heme to hemi.
And we got to get something about that B12. I cannot get my tongue around
it's
cobalamin, right? Cobalamin.
No.
How do you say it?
Cobalamin.
Cobalamin. I can't say that.
Well,
cobalamin.
How often are you going to have to say that in a daytime?
I never say it. I say B12. Okay.
Just make sure it's in the methyl.
Hey,
right?
I got.
So that's what I tell people because same thing. Because if you get tongue tied so quickly trying to say it. So if somebody says, I always say B12 and then make sure it's in the methyl form, not the cyano form.
Yeah, that's what I stick to. I can't get that last pronunciation.
Methylcobalamin and all these. Who cares, right? I mean, it's just it's B12, but it's either real B12 or it's like a fake Gucci purse or like a knockoff of Coach. That's all it is. It's either the real deal or it's a knockoff, and one is made in a lab and the other one isn't. So make sure you get the right kind. Well, listen, we wanted to answer questions from the webinar, but we're 30 minutes in.
Well, that was one of the questions. So.
It was one of the questions, so I guess technically we did do that. Next episode, if we remember, I made a note of it. We'll start answering some of those questions. But again, listen, we gave a lot of information on B12. It is one of the nutrients that a majority of the population is deficient in, which is why we talk a lot about it. But again, I hope you found this interesting. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Doctor Is In podcast from martinclinic.com. If you have any questions, you can reach us at info@martinclinic.com. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, you can head to our website and sign up for free. We also have a private Facebook group that you can join. It's a community of awesome people. Finally, I do a Facebook Live every Thursday morning at 8:30. Join us again next week for a new episode.